with that philosophy, I will do the rest of the lecture. Okay. So, जब मुझे बुलाया गया to come and speak to you people, I was also given the brief, so the topic was decided and so on. Now, this is a topic which I'm very, very interested in because I actually, those of you who are historians or even the Hindi students will know that our history has been written initially, at least in the 19th century, with a very strong Bengal focus. And although I carry the name Chakravarti, I'm not a Bengali. Okay, so I can kulla say things about Bengali. And nobody should mind because I'm not sectarian. I'm not attached to any particular region. I see myself as a product of the new India. So where Sara Desh is the same, and I don't see any difference between one region and another, and one bhasha and the other. But facility hoti hai, language is a tool for us to communicate and to understand each other. So the English will be simple and so will the Hindi be simple. The focus of historian, 19th century history, and I actually came to the subject. You've already been given a small summary by Maya and your students who have described the relationship between, why our focus today is on Savitri Pgule and on Fatima Sheikh. Now, I think it's important for us to recognize how is it that Savitri Pgule is now suddenly being recognized. I mean, there is a investment in uncovering histories and also shifting the focus away from the standard way in which we told history with a particularly nationalist thrust. So national movement, usse pehle in Bengal, whatever was happening was part of the focus. Maharashtra is actually very, to me, a much more interesting space. And when I first did I'm a scholar of ancient Indian history. So strictly speaking, my training is in ancient Indian history. I worked on Buddhism for my first piece of work, and it was called Social Dimensions of Early Buddhism. And I taught myself Pali. I went to a Pali department and I, studied Pali over there. I'm sorry to say that I didn't learn too much Pali. The department was simply tokenist. उसको शुरू किया था उन्होंने कि भैया 2500 साल का हम celebrate कर रहे थे of Buddhism, and it was 1956, and the Department of Pali Language and Literature was created as a kind of promotion. You know how the governments will often promote certain things. So उस वक्त promote कर रहे थे कि this is the land of Buddha, and so they set up this thing. It was useful from the point of view of diplomacy because we were, part of the conference. We were doing various things in Asia. So it was very important. I mean, Buddhism is important. Buddhism has always been important. आज के तहत you should actually all also, those of you who are historians might be interested in the fact that the relics of the Buddha have been, they were being put on sale, and that sale was kind of stalled, but it also went through. Now we have a museum in Saket, I think, somewhere where they've set up. They've set up a museum over there, and there's those jewels and all. So this is part of the promotion, the governmental policies of promoting and using history tactically whenever they want to. It's not serious because it's not, as you say, they will. There's a lot of politics that goes on and all of that stuff. So anyway, be that as it may, but I did. When I turned to gender, when I had to start writing on thinking about gender seriously, this is the 80s. I had finished my PhD by 81, and the next piece of research I was going to do, I was quite interested by that time in trying to understand caste and and gender together. I didn't want to do gender by itself because you can't hang it in the air. Gender has to actually be grounded in other conditions. So I decided that I should actually move to Maharashtra because Maharashtra had the history of the little history of caste studies. अब ये जितनी इंग्लिश में बोल रही हूँ हिंदी वालों को समझ आ रही है नहीं आ रही है तो हिंदी में नहीं बोल सकते हैं बीच बीच में हाँ आ रही है ना ठीक है अच्छा पर हिंदी में भी बोल सकते हैं तो मैंने सोचा कि अच्छा अब इसको यहाँ जाकर के एक्चुअली जो ऑलरेडी रास्ता खुल गया था स्कॉलर्स ने रास्ता खोल दिया था इतिहासकारों ने लिख लिया था अच्छे लेख अवेलेबल थे इसमें गेल ऑगर भी थी उसमें रोजलिंड ओहैनलन भी थी उन्होंने बहुत अच्छा काम किया था ऑन महाराष्ट्र तो उनके लिखने में they had done primary research and found material which was pioneering in some ways because caste studies took a long time to be acknowledged as an area कि हम उसको we can study it seriously or we do have material. To this day we still have less material because the archive is usually in English and it is stuck with the state के कारनामे. So it doesn't actually it's not democratic and intrinsically democratic because governments put into it what they want to put into it and at the end of the day that's only limited. Despite it so I thought to myself, and I was also interested, and this is from those of you who are religious or in a religious institution, or there are multiple locations in which we have to now engage with religion because it's also there in the public sphere much more. It was important to try and understand. One of the things that I felt concerned about is why was religion necessary? Why was conversion at all necessary for someone who is struggling to establish the gender question? Because Pandita Ramabai, whom I was going to now try and study, she grew up in a highly in a household which was a Brahmin household, but it was an interesting household because it was not invested in the normal grammatical ritualized locations. She belonged to a family of teachers, of preachers. They went around. Her father was someone who had opted out in his own time when he was moving around, going from one village to another, telling stories, harikathas. He would tell harikatha bolte the. So he would उस तरह के and Ramabai, everyone knows that in the 19th century there was a bar on women's education. Women were not allowed to be taught in the same way. I mean, they were barred from it. And historically, our Shastras have not been particularly democratic. They have decided that women and the lower orders should not be taught. That is why it's very revolutionary to bring Pgule and Fatima Sheikh and Savitri because the combination is quite important from the point of view of who has access to education. Why is access to education? And so one of the reasons I was concerned with this because many of us have grown up in a secular kind of background, at least particularly in my generation, and even to some extent later, not very strongly religiously located. But so it was interesting. I was struck with this question: why did she need to convert? Why was it not enough for her just to be a feminist or an activist on her own ground without needing this? But we must also remember that actually personal faith is important to people, and it was to Ramabai. So I decided, okay, I'll go and let me study Ramabai because, and through Ramabai, I will look at the entire dynamics of 19th century Maharashtra. तो because 19th century Maharashtra was very different from 19th century Bengal. It had its own dynamic and it was very much more vibrant in some senses. And then one discovered through these writings, because